Hi, everyone. I'm Edie Widder. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I wish it could be in person, but virtually is the next best thing. And I was asked to talk about what's next in ocean exploration. And for me, I think that's all about stalking these fantastic creatures that live in the dark depths of the ocean. This is most of the living habitat on the Earth. Most of our biosphere is deep, dark ocean. And most of what we know about the life in that ocean is dependent on dragging nets behind ships. And I defy you to name any other branch of science that still depends on thousands of year-old technology. Marine biologists claim that nets only capture the slow, the stupid, and the greedy. They provide very little information about how these animals behave in their natural habitat, obviously. The other way we know about life in the ocean is we go and visit it using exploration platforms like submersibles and remote operated vehicles. But these use bright lights and noisy thrusters. And over my many, many years of using these tools for exploration, I've often wondered how many animals there are out there just beyond the range of my lights that can see me, but I can't see them. So early on, I started trying to figure out other ways to be able to explore. And one of these was a camera system that I called the Eye in the Sea. This is a battery-powered camera that can be left on the bottom of the ocean. That wasn't exactly a novel idea. Lots of people were doing that. But I wanted it to be unobtrusive. I wanted to see without being seen. And so I was trying to find a wavelength I could use that would allow me to do that. And it was quite a challenge. I was using 680 nanometer LEDs, some recently developed deep red LEDs, but I could tell the animals were still seeing it. And finally, I got inspiration for a solution from the stoplight fish, which is an unusual animal in that most deep sea fish only produce blue light and only see blue light. But these stoplight fish can produce red bioluminescence and see red bioluminescence, and they use it like a sniper scope. But in measuring the emission spectra from the red light organ in these fish, I was struck by the sharp, short wavelength cutoff filter that they use to cut out all the shorter wavelengths. So I imitated that with the illumination system that I was developing, took the 680 nanometer LEDs and slapped a 711 nanometer cutoff filter in front of it so that I cut off all those shorter wavelengths. And the first time I got to test this was on an expedition to the Gulf of Mexico in 2004, where I wanted to put the camera down, but not just with bait, because bait only captures scavengers, and I wanted to bring in active predators. And so I wanted to create an optical lure that imitated some of the bioluminescence I was interested in, particularly that of the deep sea jellyfish Atola, which produces this spectacular pinwheel display of bioluminescence that clearly is directed at other eyes, since the jellyfish doesn't have eyes of its own. And it's thought that it functions as a burglar alarm, the theory being that the jellyfish gets munched on by something, it lights up, and that showy display attracts the attention of a larger predator, attacking their attacker and therefore affording it an opportunity to escape. So to test this, I developed an optical lure that was just a ring of blue LEDs embedded in epoxy that could imitate that pinwheel display. And you can see what a shoestring operation this was in the early days, because you can still see the word Ziploc in the mold that we used for the epoxy. So as I said, the first time we tested this was in 2004 in the Gulf of Mexico. I put it down on the bottom and just left it there. And I don't know if you can see this, but in the bottom right-hand corner of this video, there's a fish swimming right towards the camera. And I was so ecstatic when I saw this, because I finally had a camera system with an illumination system. I could tell that fish weren't being disturbed by it. In the past, I'd seen them veer away from my lights. And I had 4 hours of video like this that I had recorded my window into the deep sea, and I was seeing without being seen, and just thought it was amazing. And then 4 hours into the deployment, I had programmed the electronic jellyfish to come on for the first time. 86 seconds after it came on for the very first time, we recorded this, which is a squid over 6 feet long that was completely new to science, couldn't even be placed in any known scientific family. The electronic jellyfish is below the field of view there, but the squid seems to be attacking it. And you see the tentacle coming out to the side. That's very unusual, because that tentacle is actually shorter than the arms. this squid has recently been named Promachoteuthis, and this was clear this was an excellent way of being able to do deep sea ecology, but it was short-lived because you could only depend on the battery power. So with this as evidence of how effective a means of exploration this was, I got funding from the National Science Foundation to develop, which was what was basically became the world's first deep sea webcam. And this was installed in Monterey Canyon when the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute installed what was basically a power bar on the bottom of the ocean. And this is plugging into that power bar for the very first time. So the Eye in the Sea was one of the first experiments plugged in there at 990 meters. And then I had about 50 meters of cable going from the plug to the camera system, which then was deployed and sat on the bottom of the Monterey Canyon there for 8.5 months. So this was very much like being a stealthy naturalist on land, where you could sit behind a blind and observe the animals unobtrusively for extended periods of time. And this camera system had all the bells and whistles I could possibly want. It had the red light illumination, it had various sensors, and it had an electronic jellyfish. And so we would activate that electronic jellyfish display, the pinwheel display, and it was amazing the response we would get to that display, because over and over again, we would see displays like this one, where you're going to see a juvenile Humboldt squid come in and attack. And that was seen again and again. In this case, the squid comes in, attacks, doesn't find the food attached to it that the burglar alarm would suggest, and inks in disgust. And that's the kind of display we would see the most often. But there was this one squid, which I called kind of the Einstein of squid, who clearly recognized right away that something was not right, because as this squid comes in, it hesitates and is looking for the food source. And you can almost see it cogitating on how it should find this food that should be there. It goes away and seems to think about it for a while and thinks, well, you know, maybe if I come in from a different angle, nope. But the opportunity to be able to sit and watch animals behaving like that was amazing. And that is what actually got me invited on a giant squid hunt off Japan in 2012, where we was using a new version of the Eye in the Sea that was called the Medusa, because it could either sit on the bottom or float around in the midwater. That was a new version of the electronic jellyfish in a benthos sphere, had an intensified camera but a better one than we'd had before, and red light illumination. And so the idea behind the Medusa was, in the midwater form, you could just throw it off the back of the ship. It had 750 meters of line attached to it, and attached to a float at the surface that had a satellite beacon on it. So you throw it off the back of the ship, let it float around for a day or two, and then track it with the satellite beacon to wherever it is, go pick it up, and then review the video to see what you'd recorded. And the whole time it's down there, hopefully the animals aren't seeing the red light, but they are seeing the blue bioluminescence, which is imitating that display I told you about. This is the deep sea jellyfish Atola with that spectacular pinwheel bioluminescence display, which this optical lure was meant to be simulating. And so once we picked up the camera system and pulled it on board, then we reviewed the video. And this particular expedition was funded by television, so there were cameras rolling all the time. So they actually captured the moment when we got the first video of a giant squid. And this still gives me goosebumps. And these are scientists moving lines. We finally see it. So actually, we saw the giant squid on the second deployment of the Medusa, which was actually the first deployment with the electronic jellyfish on it. And then we saw it several times on other deployments. And it was kind of a tease because it would wave its arms in front of the camera like this, almost like it was doing a fan dance, but you couldn't see the whole squid. You just had a sense of how big it was until we got this recording where it came in for the attack and came over the electronic jellyfish, grabbed onto the huge thing next to it, just exactly what you'd expect. Not interested in the jellyfish. It's interested in whatever is munching on the jellyfish, causing it to light up. And so it's completely fearless, attacking this enormous thing that's a 3-foot cube right next to it. And so that success led then to further attempts, this one with the submersible, the Triton. And once again, we were making it stealthy using red light and intensified cameras so we could see without being seen. But in this case, we've got a bait squid, a diamondback squid, and the optical lure in this case was a squid jig. And Tsunemi Kubadera, who was the first person to ever get still images of a giant squid in the deep sea, was in the sub for this particular deployment. And you can see it's kind of a grainy image because of the intensified cameras and the red light, but you can see the giant come in and attack the bait squid. But Kubadera in the sub could only see it on the TV monitor, and he wanted to see it with his own eyes, obviously, after a lifetime of hunting this monster. And he turned on his flashlight, and when that didn't scare the squid away, he risked turning on the lights from the submersible. And at this point, the squid was munching on the bait, and it didn't bolt. In fact, it stayed around for 23 minutes, and it was just astonishing what this giant squid looked like, because we'd seen dead specimens at the surface and they were red. And this thing looks like it's been carved out of metal. It would go from bronze to brushed aluminum. And look at the size of that eye. That eye is the size of a soccer ball. It's turning that eye completely away from the bright lights, as you can see. But it was just amazing that this animal, which can grow as tall as a 4-story building, had gone for so long without being seen in its natural habitat. And I maintain that the future of the deep sea exploration is going to be more stealthy modes of exploration, because I think there are a lot of fantastic creatures down there yet to be discovered. In fact, ironically, some of those were seen by the first submersible that was lowered into the water when William Beebe and Otis Barton went down in the bathysphere off Bermuda in the early 1930s. That was just this 5-foot diameter steel sphere with these 2 big guys jammed into it. Only 2 portholes, 3 actually, but one was sealed over. One that Beebe would look out of and the other that would shine a beam of light out of. And inside the sub with them was none of the mechanical stuff that we take down with us today. And I think that may be why they saw such fantastic creatures as these great giant dragonfish, which Beebe said he saw at 2,100 feet. He claimed they were 6 feet long, and they had these tentacles or lures, one coming out of the chin, one coming out of the tail region. He described them in detail as having a red portion and a blue portion on each one. And I suspect that this could have been real, that he really did see this. There are people that are very skeptical of this, especially because he had the audacity to assign it a Latin name, which is no longer allowed, but the Latin name is the untouchable bathysphere fish. But if you look at the array of equipment that they brought down with them inside the bathysphere, there is nothing to make noise. There are none of the scrubber fans, for example. They used trays mounted inside the sphere, which held the chemicals they used to absorb the exhaled CO2, and they would violently fan a palm leaf fan over top of those chemicals to exchange the gases. And they would, in trying to conserve oxygen, they would talk very, very little. So they were very, very quiet. And there was just that one very directional light coming out that would almost maybe have the effect of almost being like a burglar alarm. And so these other fantastic creatures that they saw, the five-line constellation fish and the three-starred anglerfish, were possibly because they were using this stealthy mode of exploration. And as Bibi said, no pioneer peering at a Martian landscape could ever have a greater thrill than I did at such an opportunity to see these fantastic creatures. And I think we still have many opportunities ahead of us. Thank you.